Om Shanti. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night for Brother Charlie. Welcome, Sister Jayanti, to our wonderful program. We are very, very happy to have you here. Welcome. I know you recently made the trip back from Madhuban to UK. So, just to give context to people that you are in London, and we are very happy to have you here, and we are looking forward to hearing from you about Dadiji. So welcome. We can't hear you, Sister Jayanti. We can't hear you, Sister Jayanti.
Now should be okay. I just unmuted. Can you hear us, Jayanti? Okay.
No, we can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Om Shanti. It's my privilege to be with you to share something about Dadiji today. Dadiji truly was a jewel of light. And just thinking about Dadiji's yogi life, the prediction that her father had was that yes, she would become a yogi at a very early age and she would belong to God. And that is exactly what happened. Age 14, and she surrendered and came to Baba. And the stories we hear about her early days were also about her wisdom, her love for Baba, her love for truth. But my own personal encounter with Dadiji was in the 60s. And I would come to India from London and we'd go to Gamdevi Center where she was staying. And it would be a joy to meet someone who was so loving and kind and always radiating happiness and joy. And so I see Dadi as being the one who embodies all the different aspects of Raj Yoga in her life. Raja, the king, the sovereign, just seeing Dadi, you could see how regal she was. The way she would move, the way she would sit, the way she would walk and talk. Regal is really a true description of that angel. And then we also describe Raj Yoga as the yoga of the heart, the bhavna, the love. Dadi Prakashmani embodies pure love, love for God, and you could feel that love coming out from her continuously. Love for every member of the human family, the human race. I'll share one little story. At one point, we thought that in the days that world still had communism, we thought that a person from the secret agent branch of one of the countries had come as part of a group to visit Madhuban. And I got a bit concerned because we had given him permission to come and now he was there. And I went to Dadiji with the instrument of that country and spoke to Dadi and told her this is what we think. And Dadiji was just full of love, absolute love. Daddy said, he's come to Baba's home. What is it that he's going to see? He's just going to see love and happiness and truth. And so let him stay, let him enjoy and take whatever it is he wants to take. And as it turns out, it probably was that he was an agent because then after his Madhuban visit, he disappeared totally. But of course, this is what he saw. He just saw love and truth and joy. And so if the opposite of love is fear, then I can see how this absolutely fits that whole subject of love and bhavna in Dadi. Just good wishes for every human being, no fear whatsoever on any level. And so love for those whom she didn't know, but also love for those who she did know. And of course, it was Dadi's love that brought me closer to Baba. It was Dadi's love, actually, that gave me the inspiration for surrender. I had been in contact for a long time with the Brahma Kumaris, but it was absolutely after about 6 weeks that I went to a place called Mahabaleshwar where Daddy had organized an exhibition, and Daddy Janki and Pune, Daddy Marka worked together, and so I was there. And Dadiji's love for the Kumaris, and it was many Kumaris there, but the one that I remember is Chandraben from San Francisco. So Dadiji would hold our hand and walk with us to the exhibition, about 20-25 minutes walk away. Or she would sometimes run down the hills of Mahabaleshwar, holding our hands and running with us as if she was a teenager. She was in her 40s at that time. But her pure love for Baba was such that she wanted us to come closer to Baba through her. And she managed that beautifully, because when I got back to Pune after about 5 days of Mahabaleshwar, I said to Daddy Janki, who was my teacher there, I said to her, I want to surrender. And the story of my surrender began at that moment. It was seeing Dadiji's love, it was seeing her absolute attention on all the details of not just the exhibition, but the way she looked after all the volunteers who had come from Bombay and Pune, taking care of all of us. And I understood this is what it means to have a yogi way of living. And so it was very beautiful. And this is what I thought I want for my own life also. And I was there when Baba specially selected Dadiji and Didi to be the sisters who would lead the organization after Baba became Abhyat. And so pure love again at that moment, and the yoga, the connection of love between Didi, Dadi and Baba was an incredible experience to witness. Baba picking up a rose and putting it on Dadiji's head, picking up a rose and putting it on Didi's head. And this was a coronation of love of Sangam Yoga as a result of that pure yoga that these two souls had. And the reflection of yoga, when there's love for one, then there's unity amongst all. The relationship of Didi and Dadi, of two souls in one body, was a demonstration of that pure love and yoga with God. Each one would say, you first. The other would say, you first. And in that demonstration of love, then they would both sit together and say, well, what does Baba want? And always it was this, not my idea, not your idea, but what is it that Baba wants? I once asked Daddy Prakashmani, how long did it take the sisters in Kunj Bhavan, where 60 Kumaris were living together? Can you imagine 60 young sisters living together in a house? And Mama was with them, and Baba would come to visit from time to time. And I said to Daddy, how long did it take all of you to come together in unity and harmony? She smiled and she said, it was instant. It didn't take any time at all. And I wanted to hear more. And she then explained. And she said that because we were all surrendered to the one, there was yoga with one and one alone. There was no question of me or you or I, but all of us just wanted to do what Baba wants. And so I'm seeing the beautiful example of Dadi's yogi life in being able to follow Baba's directions absolutely at all times. An indication of her relationship with Baba on many levels. Baba, the one to whom she surrendered, Baba, the one who was her teacher, her mentor, Baba, the one who gave her the company of Mama. She traveled with Mama very often. In many of the photographs of those earlier days, you will see Dadiji with Mama. And it was because her yoga with God was so clear that God wanted her to have that very exclusive role of being Mama's companion for service And of course, it was a great learning and a great experience for her anyway. But that was the power of her yoga. And so on so many different levels, I saw Dadi as a Karmayogi, a yogi in action. Again, a little story about this. I was with Dadiji in one of the countries abroad. And again, I had the amazing fortune of traveling with Dadi many, many different places. But in this particular country, Dadi was enjoying the service, the big Brahmin family that had been created, a beautiful family. And early morning, after Amrit Vela, Dadiji called the instrument sister, and Dadiji said to her, "What's the tolling for today?" Because you would have seen in Madhuban how Dadi Bholi used to go to Dadiji's room every day, and she would show her the variety of tolis that were there and ask Dadi to select which one should be the toli for class that day. And Dadiji asked this sister, "What's the toli for today?" And the sister said, "Dadi, I've been so busy. It's not my department. Somebody else is looking after that department." Dadiji, the all-round Karmayogi, said, "But that department is also Baba's department. And Baba is responsible, and you're responsible to Baba. And so that department is also your department." Very sweetly, very lovingly, Daddy made the instrument realize that she needed to have an overall understanding of what was happening in Baba's work, and Toby was also her department. And so Karma Yoga with Daddy. And another aspect of Daddy's intellect, able to see everything and take care of everything. She would ask us sometimes, "Do you know the cost of," remember the finger toli, the missile toli that we used to get from Madhuban and still do? And it's called dosha in Hindi. And she would say, "This is the toli, which is the cheapest of all," and she would give us a price. And then there would be another toli, and she would say, "This is the cost of this particular toli, and this is the cost of this other toli." She knew everything about the economy of the yajna. She knew how much every single item cost. She knew the different varieties of rice and how the different varieties had different prices and what should be purchased and kept in stock. So Dadiji, absolutely the Karma Yogi also. So Dadi, the one who was the Raj Yogi, the Bhavana Yogi, Bhakti Yoga. She was the one who was the Karma Yogi. And she was also the one who had Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of the intellect connected with Baba. There would always be something about Baba that she would be sharing, something about Baba that she would tell us about. Dadi's timetable, of course, the timetable of a Raj Yogi. But in particular, I'm remembering the scenes at night. And we would go to say good night to Dadi. And first there'd be a little bit of conversation, a little bit of chit-chat. And then she would say, "Okay, let's start the Gita. This is the Gita Pathshala, the study place of the Gita." And she would start reading the question and answers from Baba's Murli. Then she would read the essence for the Dharana and so on. So all of this was going on, and it was amazing. Just incredible to see Dadi through the day so busy, and at night now sharing the essence of the Murli with all of us. Just a handful. How many people could fit into that little room? Not so many. But she was sharing with all of us. Dadi, the one whose Buddhi Yoga was connected with Baba because of her love for Baba, but also her love for Murli. She would read the Murli at night. She would read the Murli in the morning again. She would read the Murli in class. And she probably would have read the Murli in the afternoon if she'd had the time. And so Dadi, in Dadi's awareness, just the jewels of knowledge moving around continually. The proof of Dadi's yoga capacity, Dadi, with Baba's remembrance, was able to feel what it is each soul needed and was able to give them whatever it is they had needed. In one particular situation, somebody had left their husband and their child, and they thought that this was the way to freedom, this was the way to a yogi life, a life of service and surrender. And this had happened some months earlier, and Dadi met with that individual. We had the good fortune of having personal access to Dadi for many, many years, all the way through until the time that she moved to Shantivan. And then things shifted. The community had become so large by then. Dadi's age was a little bit advanced. But all the way through in the days of Pandapavan, she was always available for all of us. And so this person hadn't expected that Dadi would be so interested in her personal life. And she was sharing with Dadi various ideas, various things that were happening. And when Dadi asked this very personal question about her situation, she told Dadi that she had left and it was because she wanted to surrender and serve Baba. And very interesting. Dadi said to her, "No, you go back. Your child needs you." And this soul went back, following Dadi's instructions, went to her family, and afterwards she told me it was as if Dadi picked up something that was deep in my heart that I wasn't even aware of. And Dadi was able to support my family by telling me what my real service was and what my duty was. And of course, once the child was 18 and could manage, then she did become free and she could have a life of surrender. But at that point, what she had done was suppress something deep in her heart. And of course, the child also did need her at that moment. So yoga is not just sitting down and meditating. Yoga is remembrance of Baba in a very loving, natural way. Yoga is also being so much in tune with Baba that I can know what it is others need and be an instrument to be able to help fulfill their need in the way that was necessary. And so Dadi was all of these things. And then I also saw Dadi absolutely in tune with what it is people she didn't know. Yogi. A yogi can understand the pulse of an individual just by a glance. And so when there would be VIPs who would come to meet Dadiji, whether in India or abroad, Dadi would say something to them that was very practical and helpful for them, for their life. And in that moment of understanding what it is that they needed, just through her connection with Baba, her radar was wide open and she was able to understand and give them whatever it is that was helpful for them. Many, many situations with Dadi in terms of world service, but again, her yoga was the guiding light for her. Sometimes she would say to me, "Okay, you've asked me this question. I'm not going to answer you now. Ask me tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock again. Meanwhile, I'll have talked to Baba and I'll have found what I need to tell you." And so often that would be the case. Bring a question to Dadi and she would listen intently. She would ask questions if she needed to, but then she would be the one who was sharing whatever was needed. And so very beautiful experience with Dadi and her yogi way of life and her capacity to give happiness and joy to everyone. The story of Dadi sitting in the courtyard in the sun after the Murali so that she was available to everyone, absolutely everyone. It didn't matter who you were, it didn't matter whether you spoke her language or you didn't. She would communicate with the language of the eyes, the language of her smile, the language of silence. and she would give a nod of her head and made you feel you belonged. Baba at one point had said to the daddies, just as everyone used to feel that Baba is mine, everybody should feel that the daddies are mine also. I think Daddy definitely achieved this in her lifetime, because everyone would say, my daddy, my daddy, my daddy. Culture, religion, tradition, none of those things came into the picture, just Daddy and her radiance of love. Daddy was concerned with the big picture, but she was also concerned with the little detail of your personal situation and how she could find ways to help you progress in that. And so very often, Daddy would see something in your eyes and would say, come, let's go for a walk. And she would take us around the Tower of Peace. And Daddy's favorite time was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Daddy would sleep very little in the afternoon. And sometimes I'd be sitting in the terrace of Indraprasth, and she would come out from her room and she would look around and she would beckon me across. Probably she'd look back with whoever she saw. If she saw somebody around, she would call them to join her. Then she would hold my hand and we would go around the Tower of Peace. Once, twice, however long it took for the conversation. And then she would ask. And then she would also tell you very openly, very straight, whatever it is you needed to hear. And so the yogi who could read our mind could not interfere in what was going on in our minds, but would open the door for us to be able to share very openly and take her guidance to be able to come closer to Baba. And so I see Daddy's life was a life of total surrender, which means totally connected with God at all times. Just imagine when Brahma Baba left, there were 400 centers. And by the time Dadiji became Avya, there were, I think, 8,000 centers. At the time Baba became Avya, there were centers in Bharat. And then, of course, Baba the angel did service of all the countries around the world. But the Dadis were his instrument for this. And the Dadis then, and Dadi Prakashmani especially, Dadi sustained all the different countries. Not just by traveling to those places, she went to all the places that were there with centers during a physical lifetime, but also she would be the one who welcomed everyone to Madhuban. I've always deeply felt that Brahmins abroad have been able to become Brahmins through Avyakt Bapdada, but also through Madhuban. But Dadiji was the one who made Madhuban accessible for everyone. Several times I would be in Madhuban just before the double foreign season started, which in those early days used to be February and March. And Dadi would invite me to the meetings she was having with groups. And every year there would be a meeting with the Madhuban Nivasis about 2 weeks, 10 days before the arrival of the double foreigners or the arrival of the conference guests, whatever it is that was going on. And at that point, what would happen was that she would talk to the Sevadharis and the Madhuban Nivasis, and she would say to them, just think about how much love Brahma Baba had for everyone, and how much Brahma Baba would have loved all his children from all these different corners who are coming now. And so our duty is to share Baba's love with all of them. And if we can do this, then yes, we'll have brought them closer to Baba. And so she would inspire them and motivate them. And of course, when we went to Madhuban, we would see the love with which Madhuban Nivasis would welcome us and receive us. And so Madhuban became our home because of Daddy's love for Baba and her love for his children. And so she would be absolutely generous in terms of her time, in terms of her availability, in terms of the classes she was conducting, but also in terms of all the physical facilities of Madhuban, and especially in terms of Brahma Puja. Who doesn't remember Daddy laughing and saying, I know what all of you want. You're waiting for ice cream, aren't you? Or she would say, what is it that you want? You want potato chips? Okay, we'll arrange for potato chips. So Daddy, the one who must have built that temple where they have unlimited offerings, the Srinath Dwari, where they have bhog of 36 different varieties every day. And yes, her big heart, her generous heart, and again, proof of that love for Baba. Daddy's vision of world service. Of course, Daddy was the one who, in 1977, in the month of July, stepped foot in the UN and stood in the plaza of the UN, looking at all those flags of all the different nations, and looking up said, one day, Shiv Baba's flag will fly here. And so the secret of our success at the UN is Daddy's yoga with Baba and the inspiration and intuition that came to her in UN Plaza at that moment, that Baba's flag would be hoisted there one day. And of course, today Baba also remembered the UN and their desire to bring people together for peace, and how Baba is the one, and Baba's children are the ones who are bringing people of all backgrounds together into one family. Apart from this vision in an unlimited way of service, and Daddy would inspire us to bring leaders from abroad, and she would meet them with love and sustain them with love. But she would be meeting us and sustaining us with love so that we would be ready for such service, even if it was hard work sometimes. So she would say to us, Baba has selected you for a task to serve the world, and so this is what you have to do. You have to bring the leaders here to Madhuban so that they can experience who is Baba and what Baba can do. So what does it mean to be a yogi? It means to be in love with God, to be in remembrance of God, to be doing God's work, to be inspiring others to come closer to God. And so all of this is something we saw continually. There was a very interesting teacher's class that I always remember that we had with Dadiji. We were in the history hall, and a group of teachers from all over the world, maybe 40, 50, 60 of us, something like that. And Dadiji would call us for a fruit party. And so we'd go to the history hall, and there would be a plate of very beautiful multicolored fruits, and each one would receive that, and Daddy would give drishti as the plates were being handed out, and we would enjoy our fruits, and Daddy would also start a conversation. And this time she was asking us, what is our effort at that present moment? And each one was sharing their efforts. And then somebody asked Daddy, what is your effort? And Daddy said, when I leave, I want everyone to give me only blessings and nothing but blessings from their heart. And this is my desire, that I should leave with everyone's blessings. And so Daddy's yoga with God, to be able to serve others, to be able to give contentment to others, so that they would give blessings from their heart. And so I see how Daddy's total lifestyle is that of the yogi. Daddy's power of yoga has made service blossom across the world, has allowed service to flourish in India, and bring service to the standard, the level it is now whereby if you call presidents and prime ministers to come to Madhuban, they come. When you invite any of the cabinet ministers, they come. If you ask religious leaders to come, they come. Daddy's power of purity was outstanding. In 86, there was a gathering of the Gurus of Bharat for the first time in Madhuban. And normally, all the Gurus have a bit of a tussle in terms of whose seat is higher than the other, and so on and so on. And I welcomed them and said, all of you are my brothers. I love you all equally. I don't know who to give a higher seat to whom at what time. But can you just be my brothers and be part of the family so we're all together as one? She won their hearts. But also, at the time of departure, one of the big Gurus of India who had come, he was asked to share his experience before leaving. He came on the Gadi and he bowed to Daddy, he bowed to the photograph of Brahma Baba in Om Shanti Bhavan, and he sang Baba's praise that Baba has done what we haven't been able to do. He has brought purity for families, he has inspired young people for purity, he has put women in front, and that is the foundation of purity. And he said how at 2 a.m. in the morning, he had gone for a walk around the courtyard in Pandit Bhavan. He'd been staying in Sukhtam, but the person on duty had recognized his clothes and allowed him to come in. And so he'd gone around, and he said, at that moment, you can pick up from the vibrations of the place what is the quality in that place. And if there's anything of disturbance, you pick it up. And he said, as I walked around, I could feel only purity and nothing but purity. So he put his hands together and bowed in front of Daddy and said, Pranam to Daddy Ma, the one who is the embodiment of purity and has therefore been able to create a community where purity truly exists. And yes, it's God's work. It's Brahma Baba who inspired you, but you are the one who are now the leader. And your purity has allowed this to happen. And so if purity is the proof of my relationship with God, definitely that was proof of Dadiji's purity and her connection with Baba and her love for Baba. So many other stories to share, but maybe it's time for us to take a pause. Is that right? Or should I continue with stories? Shireen, Helen, give me an indication.
We have Brother Charlie now. But we would love to hear more stories. It was so beautiful. I didn't even realize the time. It's both your soothing voice and hearing about Dadiji, who was so extraordinary. Thank you, Sister Jayanti, so much for this. Now we have Brother Charlie sharing for a few minutes.
So thank you so much, Shireen, and Jayanti Ben, so lovely to hear all those stories. I mean, it really took me down memory lane and so many things flooding through my mind. But as time is just short, maybe I can just share Daddy's final moments, because I was actually arrived in Madhuban a day before Daddy left the body. And on the 22nd of August, I heard that Daddy wasn't well. She'd fallen into a coma. And the next morning I was having Amrit Vela, and I just had such a strong feeling to go. And I packed my bag and I was on a flight at 11 a.m. that day. And I arrived on the 24th, the day before Daddy left, and I just went from Ahmedabad straight to Dadiji's cottage, and I went in, and Dadiji was lying in her room, just lying on her bed. I remember the image came that was like the Sleeping Beauty. And I just sat there and meditated. And then the next day, I went to see Nevebai after breakfast, and I just spoke to him for a few minutes, and he said, go and visit Dadiji. So I went into her room, and she was connected to all these medical machines like blood pressure and so on. And she was lying so quietly, but I noticed that all these machines were totally fluctuating. 200, 50, 10, 160. And yet she just seemed so still. And I sat there just for a few moments, and then I went out and came back again about half an hour later. This is a little bit before 10 a.m. And there was a huge crowd that had gathered outside Dadiji's cottage. And I was just standing there, and suddenly I saw all the dadas and the daddies arrive, Daddy Manoharindra, Daddy Ratan Mohini, and they were running into Dadiji's cottage. And Shuluben came up to me and said, come with me. And we went into Dadiji's room. And I remember just looking at all these medical machines, and it was 0, 0, 0, 0. And Daddy, the soul must have just flown. But you know how some, images of your life are just so deeply, impressed on the intellect. And I'll never forget the atmosphere in that room. There was Dadiji just lying in her bed. The soul had just flown. And on one side was her friends, her sisters of 70 years, Daddy Jayanti, Daddy Gulzar, all the daddies, Muni Ben, Mohini Ben. On the other side, all the brothers, Nevebai, Brijmohan Bhai, Ramesh Bhai. And the room was full. And some of you may remember that Baba said that this was the first time that someone had left the body in public. And I remember us feeling that, yes, that was Dadiji's life. She had nothing to hide. Her life was for everybody, her life of love and her life of beauty. And in that 10 or 15 minutes, it was just totally silent. But the silence was just a palpable reverence, and I could feel the mind of everyone in that room. How much Dadiji had built that incredible respect into all of us. How deeply we loved her, and how really her life had been such a model for me on so many different levels. So many stories and experiences I had that she was an extraordinary model for me as to really, what this life is about. And what I loved was Dadiji was so natural. Her whole approach was completely natural. She was so light and so lovely. So there's this incredible atmosphere, but it was also an atmosphere of reverence and even, I would say, wonder. And it just floated through my mind that we're witnessing like an angel being born, a soul that has performed the highest actions under God's instructions, one who became so humble and really followed Baba. And we all know that when you would ask Dadiji, would you like to come to Australia? Remember how she used to answer. She would say, well, if Baba gives Dadiji permission, then Dadiji will come. She would talk about herself in that third person. And what I remember was that in all the Borg messages, every day there was a Borg message about Dadiji. And, the whole atmosphere of Shantivan, I remember, was quite extraordinary. But in each message, Baba mentioned what I often think is Dadiji's formula for her life. When Brahma Baba left us, he left us with the 3 words, incorporeal, egoless, and viceless. But for me, Dadiji's message was self-respect and respect. And really, the more I've reflected on that, that was really her life, that her love for Baba created this absolutely powerful stage of self-respect. And because of that, the way she respected everyone, I felt she held the whole yajna in her attitude of valuing everybody, her attitude of giving dignity to every individual, not only the BKs, but everyone else, as Jayanti Ben so beautifully put it. And I think just her attitude held us all together. And her leadership, I found extraordinary, and absolutely model leader. And I remember once I was with a little film crew that traveled to New York and different places, making a little film called Women of Spirit, women as leaders. And it was Daddy Jayanti and Dadiji. And we interviewed Dr. James Jonah, who many of us remember was a close friend of the BKs. And I asked him, who's the most impressive leader you've met? Because he interacted with many of the world's leaders at that time. Straight away, he said, Daddy Prakashmani, because her life was the leadership. Her thoughts equaled her actions. And she was a leader of love and a leader of respect. And the way he spoke, and I thought it was remarkable, was absolutely beautiful. But, those days post-Daddy's passing, incredible memories that I have of those times. But I'm also watching the time of our webinar, and we have gone over time, but it's just so beautiful to remember. To me, August means Raksha Bandhan, such a wonderful festival, but also Dadiji, and the incredible memories of the angel she was, and the angel that has impacted each and all of our lives. So thank you so much, everybody. Really lovely to be a part of this evening.
Thank you, Brother Charlie. It was very beautiful. I'm thinking about what you're saying about Dadiji and her life of transparency. And wasn't she stunningly beautiful, stunningly spiritual. So thank you, Sister Jayanti. Thank you, Brother Charlie, for sharing such wonderful memories of Dadiji. I feel one session is not enough. You need to have a session. And I'll talk to I'll talk to Sister Gayatri and see if we can have another session, because this is so profound. We have right now a video for the drill. We are a little late, but it's okay. So, Helen, do you have the drill queued?
I am navigating a technical issue, hoping it will cooperate with me shortly.
It seems like it's cooperating.
Yes, it is. There we go.